Hello, I'm Jill O'Donnell-Tormey, CEO and Director of Scientific Affairs at the Cancer Research Institute, and I'm very pleased to be recording this webinar for our recurrent donors, the people we call the Friends of CRI. We've received some questions from you, our donors, and I'm going to spend the next few minutes trying to answer those so you get to know me and the Cancer Research Institute better. So one of the first questions that came in was, how have you personally been affected by cancer? So I was affected by cancer when my mother was diagnosed with ovarian cancer. She battled this disease for 12 years, and this was many years ago. She ended up dying in 1992, but she was one of the lucky people that even though she had stage 3 ovarian cancer, and after surgery, she had a pretty remarkable response to what was then combination chemotherapy. It was very toxic chemotherapy. I stayed with her in the hospital for many of these treatments, and it was really a horrible situation to see your mom going through. But luckily, it put her into remission for 7 years. And then, unfortunately, as is very typical of ovarian cancer, eventually it does come back. And in the last 5 years of her life, she had 3 recurrences, which all required more combination chemotherapy, which she really didn't want to go through, but there really were no other options at that time. So at this time, I was actually in graduate school going for my Ph.D. And I was always interested in disease, but seeing what my mother went through and eventually losing her life to it, it became something of a passion for me that what I wanted to do for the rest of my life was really to concentrate my research and my efforts on cancer. And that's what I have done. I was a former postdoctoral fellow of the Cancer Research Institute. And I subsequently, after then moving, at that point I was at Rockefeller University. I then went to Weill Cornell in the Department of Medicine. And then I came to CRI, and I've been at CRI for 30 years. And so though I no longer do research, I do feel that my commitment to cancer and the impact that I'm having through this unbelievable organization is actually much greater than I ever could have if I had stayed a researcher in the laboratory. So it's been a great honor for me to be part of the Cancer Research Institute for so long, to work with some remarkable people, with remarkable scientists around the world, and to really know that what I do every day is helping patients and hopefully eventually leading to what I hope will be cures for all cancers using the immune system. So another question was, what science are you excited about at the moment? Well, I think as you all know, the Cancer Research Institute is dedicated solely to the field of cancer immunotherapy. So since our inception back in 1953, we run one of the few organizations that had the belief that your immune system could really be used to treat and control and eventually cure cancer. And it is really through that persistence and that support of excellent science over those years that we have gotten to where we are now. And so I'm very excited that we're finally at a point that what this organization has been solely dedicated to for more than 60 years, and that what was once a hypothesis has now been proven. We now have proof of principle that there is the ways, if you can excite and capture and use the amazing capacity that each one of our own immune systems have, you can actually lead to durable, long-term survival responses in a variety of cancers. So I think that's what I'm most excited about now, that I think it's been a validation of what we at CRI and the scientists we have supported for so many years have believed in. And now we know that it is something that the rest of the scientific and medical community also believes in, and immunotherapy is revolutionizing the way we treat cancer. And I think it's going to stay and continue to be a backbone of treatments well into the future. But with that said, we still are only at the beginning. So there still needs to be an awful lot of research done and supported by people like you that allows us to unlock more discoveries that can be converted into more treatments that will impact more patients. So they asked me, another question is, what CRI-funded science are you most excited about at the moment? So the thing I'm most excited about is really trying to understand why some people respond to immunotherapies and some don't. I think it's, as I said, a remarkable place where we are in history right now, because we have patients, and it's a significant number of patients, and it varies. In melanoma, it could be as many as 50 or 60%. In non-small cell lung cancer, maybe around 25% of patients that are remarkably responding extremely well to immunotherapies. But then you have the majority of patients that aren't. So that's positive and negative, but I think it puts us in a place that we've never been before. We can ask questions that we couldn't ask before, and we now can really begin to interrogate at a very scientific and really, I think, method that you can understand why are this one section of patients that look like they have the same cancer at the same stage respond and others don't. And so this allows us to really say, is there something genetically different about their tumors? Is there something different about each other's immune system? Or what is it? And knowing that, we can actually develop new therapies and most likely combination therapies that will impact more of these patients. So that's what I'm most excited about. I think we have to understand what's happening at the tumor microenvironment, and that isn't just about the tumor, but there's lots of other cells at a tumor microenvironment. So there's a lot of different types of immune cells. Most of the immunotherapies that have been approved to date have focused on T cells, but that's only one class and type of immune cell. So I think there's a lot to be learned about knowing about the innate immune system, which includes things like macrophages and monocytes, and also about normal tissue, the stroma that surrounds a tumor, and how that impacts as a physical barrier that the immune system can't get in there to attack the tumors, or is it actually taking an active role of inhibiting the immune system? So those are type of the things that I'm very excited about. So I'm asked, what difference does a recurring donation really make for CRI planning ahead with funding? So I think people have heard me say for many times that science is not linear. Uh, we're a research organization. We're not a social service organization. So I can't tell you that you give me this many dollars and we're going to cure cancer, because science and discovery just doesn't work that way. So we want to take your donor dollars and know that they're supporting the best science in the world, wherever it is. We use our scientific advisory council, which really is a who's who of cancer immunologists from around the world. These are the true experts. We use them as our talent scouts and our people that are reviewing applications that come in to judge what are the most worthy candidates, the most worthy projects that we can support where donor dollars can have the most impact. So on top of the fact that it's not linear and you have to support different people, sustained funding for research makes a real difference. And we can't provide sustained funding to scientists if we don't get sustained funding from our donors. So I think it's clear the message that we've gotten from talking, we've in the process of a strategic plan and talking to the stakeholders in the field, that increasing the level of funding we can provide and increasing the number of years we can provide a given scientist is an important way that we can actually get the most out of our, most bang for your buck. And I think it allows the scientists to know that they have a cushion of support, that they don't have to continue to keep writing grants, but rather can focus on their research. And so knowing that we have recurring donors like you, it allows us to plan to know how much money we have to actually give away each year. I think you all know that CRI raises its operating budget each year. We don't rely on any federal, state, or city funding. It's all philanthropic dollars. So the more that we know ahead that we can count on in the future years, it allows us to budget better and allows us to know what we can do. So it's an extremely important part for me as CEO, as I plan for the future and plan for year by year what we're able to do. It's your sustaining support that really makes a difference. So they asked me here, where will CRI be in 5 years? So I would love to be able to say that CRI will be out of business, but I'm also not a Pollyanna, and I also I want to be realistic and pragmatic about where we are. Unfortunately, I think we'll still be in existence. I think research is still going to be the answer to cancer, and we're going to need organizations like the Cancer Research Institute to continue to provide funding that allows people to do high-risk, high-reward projects. I think you all know that federal funding is always in jeopardy, and in many terms, when you look at real dollars, the amount of funding from the federal government has declined over the years. So private funding through organizations like the Cancer Research Institute become more and more important to the research enterprise. So I think CRI will still be here. We are going to stay committed to the field of cancer immunology and immunotherapy. And I think we will continue to do what we're doing now in terms of supporting the full continuum of research. That means from the laboratory, which some basic biology and understanding the immune system comes from, through translational research, which is trying to take those discoveries and make sense of how they can be used in the clinic to actually treat patients, and actually funding cancer immunotherapies and clinical trials. So I think that full spectrum of research from the from the lab to the clinic, and also importantly from the clinic back to the lab. That's extremely important. I think you've all heard that sometimes the models that we have, like mouse models, and you find you can cure a lot of mice, but when those same drugs that had used to treat mice go into humans, we don't get the same results and we're not curing. So I think it's really important to take the results we are getting in the clinic now, and this goes back to those responders and non-responders, and taking and looking at those patient samples and bringing those back into the lab and analyzing them with all of the tools and the technologies that are now available and continue to be increasing to really understand at a mechanistic level what's happening. And then once we understand, you can do some testing, but that testing of the in the lab can really be informed and led by what's happening in the clinic. So what they said also here, where will immunotherapy be in 5 years? Well, I wish I had a crystal ball to be able to tell you. I do know the certain things I will say. I think you're going to have more and more immunotherapies that are being approved by the FDA. And immunotherapy is a very big word. It is not one single drug or one single treatment. So immunotherapy captures a whole wealth of different types of therapies. You may have all known that the excitement the last few years have mostly been about what have been called checkpoint blockades. These are antibodies that actually block checkpoints that turn off the immune system and allow the immune system to do its job, and are able to stop tumor cells from making themselves invisible to the immune system. There's also more recently things called CAR T cells, which are chimeric antigen receptor T cells. So these are T cells that are taken from a patient and genetically engineered and given back. But those are only two forms of immunotherapies. There's also a thing called bispecific antibodies. There's one of those that has been approved, and I think you're going to see more of those approved. There's also cancer vaccines, which we have, one therapeutic, preventative cancer vaccine for cervical cancer approved, but therapeutic vaccines have seem very enticing, and there's been a lot of research done on them, but we haven't really had the success yet with therapeutic vaccines. But I think that will change if these vaccines are used in combination with some of these other types of immunotherapies. So I think you're going to see more different types of immunotherapies, most of them being used in combination, either immunotherapy plus immunotherapy or immunotherapies along with things like radiation and chemotherapy. I also think you're going to see a trend as more and more immunotherapies become frontline treatments. Not most of the initial approvals of these checkpoint blockades were in patients with advanced cancer that had failed standard of care. There are a few that are now approved as frontline treatment for non-small cell lung cancer and melanoma. I think you're going to see more and more of these immunotherapies move into becoming the first option for patients, not just after they've failed other treatments. So I think and ultimately, I think you're going to see more cancer types that are actually proven to be responsive to immunotherapy. So I know that's a little generic kind of statement about what's happening in 5 years, but I think that's at least as much as I can tell from without having a crystal ball of where we will be. Then I have a question here. When did the science behind immunotherapy first become real to you? So I think there's a great story. We have Dr. Jim Allison is the head of our scientific advisory council. Now, he was a dyed-in-the-wool immunologist. He wasn't a cancer immunologist, wasn't really interested in figuring out how to treat cancer. He was interested in understanding how the immune system works, and more specifically, how T cells work. And he is one of the discoverers of the first checkpoint blockade, this anti-CTLA-4. And he had the idea of, when he just found out how this worked, that the immune system has a way to turn itself off, and if you blocked the thing that it usually uses to turn itself off, you allowed your immune system to continue going. He just curiously said, I wonder if this would work in cancer. And he did start in mice and showed he could, cure mice this way. And for many years of pushing, he actually got some pharmaceutical companies to be interested in taking this discovery into the clinic. And it became the first checkpoint blockade approved for melanoma. And Jim tells a story that he was at Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center when this checkpoint blockade went into phase 1 trial. So this is the first time it's being used in humans. And he actually was called from the lab to come down to the clinic to meet a young patient who was only in her 20s, who had advanced melanoma, which had spread to her brain, to multiple organs. She had failed every therapy tried. She was very close to probably dying. And she enrolled in this phase 1 trial of this new immunotherapy, this checkpoint blockade. And after, I think, only 2 treatments, she went into complete remission. And Jim was called down by Dr. Jed Walchuk, who is another member of our scientific advisory council, who actually heads CRI's clinical strategy, and was treating this patient in the clinical trial, for Jim to meet this woman. And the woman felt like Jim had saved her life. And I think this is a wow moment. I think it's an amazing moment for a scientist who's really interested in science and discovery, but to see the impact of what your work can have. And luckily, this patient, being in one of the first trials, which I think now is about 11 or 12 years ago, is alive, well, now has two children. And so this is almost a miracle story, but it's a story that we'd like to see happening for more patients. I think it goes back to what I said about proof of principle. When it works, when you can get your immune system working in the right way in the right patient, I think it can, engender and develop, cause these remarkable responses. And I think this is when the reality came out that how important, being a scientist, being at CRI, supporting the work, and a lot of the work we do is really basic discovery. But to see that these building blocks, these discoveries, are what lead to today's, breakthrough therapies. And I think, we want to see more Jim Allisons. Our fellowship program, which supports young scientists right after they've gotten their Ph.D. or M.D. And it's these young people that are interested in immunology and cancer immunology that we want to support because we want to see more of them turn into the Jim Allisons down the road, and that they are the ones that are going to be responsible for developing these new immunotherapies, which are really going to change how cancer is treated and how impactful it's going to be for so many lives. So I think that was kind of the big aha moment for me. And then I guess the last question I have here is, what is something that people don't expect about CRI? So I don't know. I mean, my side is I wish more people knew about CRI in general, and that what a great organization we are, that we very carefully steward the dollars, the donor dollars that we get. We can't work without you, the donor, trusting us with your generosity. And know that everyone here on the staff and our scientists advisory council and our board of trustees is very conscious about using those dollars to support the best research and to use it well. And so I think that many people don't know that we raise our operating each year, that we only have about 25 people on staff, but I think that our impact really outweighs our size, and that we have really dedicated people that have committed their lives to this. We have many people on staff that have been here for decades and really believe in our mission, as well as we have board members that have been with us forever and ever. And it is through their generosity and their leadership that we can continue to do what we do. And I think knowing that it's a long road, but when you look back and trace the field and say, wow, the Cancer Research Institute uh, really built this field and created this field where nobody else believed in this high risk, research. But the high risk has led to high rewards. And I think if you, as sustaining donors, our friends of CRI, continue to support us, you can be part of history. I think CRI has already made history, but there's more history to be made. And I think only with you and us working together and our scientists, and that we can do this, and that it will really change the world of cancer for cancer patients. So again, I would like to thank you very much for your support. I hope you will continue to support us with sustained contributions. And please keep following us on all our channels, and I hope to continue to communicate with you, and I wish you the best possible joy and happiness at this holiday season and the best in the new year. And I can get back to you with, at that time, to let you know more of the impact and results we are having thanks to your donations. So thank you very much.